All right, I mentioned this just really briefly before a few more people came in and added on. Over in the corner of the room, I've got 5 different articles that are printed off. Those of you that are here in person, if you want to grab one of those for your article review for next week, you can. We'll kind of go over some of the different topics of it though. One of them is artful learning. There's a project-based learning one. I believe there's a STEAM one, which is like adding art into STEM. But just it's kind of more honing in on embedding art into the classroom with those articles. Those of you that are online, if you were in Blackboard and you go to the content and you go down to week 2, and you click on the actual assignment that's linked in there, the PDFs of those are already there that you can select through with one of them. If there's a different article somewhere that you were like really passionate about reading and writing a review up on that instead, that's fine. I'm just taking one of the steps off of your plate for this week, okay? So feel free while we wait for one more person. I'll see if they come. I'll give them maybe another minute and then we'll just kind of roll in. But if you want to kind of glance at those and see if you want to grab one, feel free. But just know that we'll have an article review for next week as well. Maybe I don't like this. I was testing about using the computers here. I don't know if I love having everything all on the screen. Maybe we can deal with it being on the side. Maybe it's not that bad. We'll cook. We can handle it. All right. So over the course of the week, I've got maybe 4, maybe 5, 4 different emails about questions of the BTS lesson plan, things like that. So we're just going to briefly go back through it. I want to make sure that it's kind of easily like settled in your head of how like that works, things like that, how you might be able to use it. Maybe we can have some of the people that worked through that struggle and maybe they feel comfortable sharing out their idea of how they did it, and so that you can get a few more examples kind of rolling around in your head with how that works. Because honestly, and this is my opinion, but I really, really, really do think it is a way to embed almost any subject, because kids want to talk. They really do. They want to share their thoughts on things, and it's one way that they can do that in kind of a safe manner. So this is actually a lesson that I did. I've done this with upper elementary, and I've actually done this one a couple different times with middle school, and I've done it once with my high schoolers. I usually kind of sprinkle it in every couple of years just because I'll do it with the broad whole gamut of like who I'm teaching at that moment in time. And so then I just wait a few years till like those kids pass through, and then I bring it back up again. But this happens to be one that I do, and timely as it is, and it's one of those things like as teachers we need to think about like how do you cover the topics that are hard, right? So example being last week, how do you deal with the day after, right? When like everything kind of shakes your world and you still have to go into class and you're around all those little kids trying to process things in their own world, right? And it might not make sense to them. So how do you cover topics like that? Maybe it's not the day after, Maybe it's just a really important moment in history that needs to be covered, but it's a tough subject. How do you cover it and do it justice at an appropriate level for them, right? So one example of that where it's like kind of tricky to find that appropriate level would be 9/11. Like there's a lot of things that happen, a lot of stories that they might hear about, and that might not be right for them at their age, right? So we'll go through a really quick VTS version of a sculpture, and then I'll show you a couple different versions of how you might use arts to approach a topic like that. So that's not necessarily science-based, like we're going to be covering the rest of tonight, but I just want to show you like ways that like art can kind of help with that. Okay, so with this particular sculpture, I'm going to show it from a couple different angles, but just take a moment and I want you to just kind of observe the sculpture, look at it for details, see what you notice, and then in just a moment we're going to share out with the rest of the group. All right, if I step back out of like a teacher role and like talk to you like teacher to teacher wise, you take that moment. So in the procedure of your lesson plan with VTS, I would literally write that there's a step where you take a moment where the students don't talk and they just quietly look at the artwork. Then the next step down in the procedure, I'd say we're going to start off basic, and I'm going to ask the question, what do you see? I want to give as many opportunities to students to answer that question as I can. If I have students that tend to be timid or maybe they're not as far along in their thought processes of how to share out with artwork or breaking down writing or images that we've talked about before, I want to really encourage those students to share out early on. So the differentiation for that stuff will be encouraging those students more during this first question of what do you see? Okay. So that would kind of fall into that category. All right, so stepping back into discussion about this particular artwork, what do you see? Yeah.
I noticed how you can see the city buildings in the background. So if you're over there, you could probably see this building from over on the other side.
Okay, so we're noticing the location of the sculpture. We're noticing the buildings far off in the background. It looks like it stands alone. There's nothing really around it. Okay. What else do we see? The middle part, the silver, it looks like a teardrop.
And it's purposely made to look cracked, so it represents some pain, probably.
Okay, so you're noticing the crack in it, and you're thinking that's intentional to notice or to emphasize on some pain. So right there, stepping back out in the teacher version, that's me honoring her, supporting her evidence or her idea with evidence, right? So that actually would fall in like the next category, but you're going to have students that are ready to jump ahead in those discussions. All right, what else do we notice?
I feel like it doesn't seem to be as like heavily protected as I thought it would be. Like it just looks like from what I can see, it's just a fence. I would feel like it would have a lot more protection or boundaries around it.
Okay, so we're noticing that there's just a simple fence around kind of the base. There's not a lot of security. Anything else we're seeing?
I think like having on that, like it just looks open, like I feel like it's easy for people to get in and out of it.
Okay. Um, so it's out in the open, easy to approach to get there. Okay. What do you think is happening in this sculpture?
Our nation is mourning.
Okay. What do you see that makes you say maybe our nation is mourning?
I think it's kind of been said, but like that, it looks like a teardrop, and with the way it's cracking, like our nation's been torn apart.
Okay. So you're noticing that teardrop shape, that tear, and what do you see, or what is it that's giving you that idea of it being our nation? And it's okay if you don't know. I'm just curious if you see anything that makes you say that.
Because I mean, I guess because I know that it emphasizes, or it like resembles 9/11, and then that at one point it looks like that was a whole sculpture, like without the teardrop and the break in it.
Okay. So you're mentioning that you have some prior knowledge on 9/11,
Yeah. Yep.
and just mentioning that break in it. So maybe that's talking about similarities between the sculpture and kind of the break that happened during that event. Okay, so that would be also an example of you're going to have students coming in with prior knowledge about situations, events, things like that that you can play off of, you can build off of. And maybe somebody else hadn't even considered that. Okay. We are going to pause on that for a moment. So just a different angle. If you were standing at the sculpture, you'd probably see it more from this angle. The title of this piece does happen to be "To the Struggle Against World Terrorism" by Zurab Tasseretti. And this happens to be a Russian artist. And this sculpture was gifted to the US on the 5-year anniversary of 9/11 from Russia. I don't know if I would mention all of that to students right away, like when we first look at it, because I like to not give them necessarily information. But if I were to post a photo of the sculpture, like up in the classroom, I might have that information with it, but they can kind of seek it out themselves. At some point, not right away with this discussion, but at some point, maybe that information could lead into a discussion with students about how when the attack on the Twin Towers happened, it wasn't just an attack on the US. There's countries all over the world that have business offices within them. And so there's people from all over the world that were affected by it. And so just acknowledging that it might not have even been just the US mourning, like the whole world was shocked at the event, right? So that is one way of kind of starting that conversation. Eventually I would have up maybe an article, like a news article about when it was gifted. That article happens to have a little bit more information about this site was specifically chosen. So we mentioned the city off in the background. So that is actually New York City in the background. The land that the sculpture is on is actually New Jersey. It's their side of the harbor. And that piece of the harbor that the sculpture is on happened to have been the site that all the first responders, they would leave the island and they would come over to this side of it, and that's where they had like their breaks. So they'd be off for 6 to 8 hours. So this was like where the tent city was for them, where they could kind of decompress a little bit, get a little bit of rest before they'd go back to work for 8 to 12 hours and dealing with that. So I know when I read the article, it talked about the amount of tears that was shed at this location when they could finally start processing what they were seeing, what they were dealing with. So that might be maybe an aspect that you go about it. So that's just one aspect of using VTS. Now, if I was writing this up, I would look at the art standards, and I would look at either, when I say the red section or the yellow section, do you know what I'm talking about? You remember when we had them up? And like they're like the first ones were aqua, and then there was purple, and there's the red and yellow. So the red and yellow ones deal with when we're talking about other people's artwork or your own artwork. So when we're having a discussion about the artwork, that's where you're going to find those standards. It's kind of tucked in those. Those are, they're called responding and connecting. So when students are responding to artwork and they're connecting to events in their own lives, things like that, that's where that's coming up at. So I would attach one of those standards, but then I would also attach another standard. So we're not just doing the VTS discussion, but there's going to be, this would be like part 1 or mini lesson. I would probably take what I called the extension, which maybe confused you guys, but I would take the second part and I would create that smaller lesson that tags along with it. So like, we talked about this, but now what are we going to do with it? Right? So if I was in a class, I would probably have a whole day where we're doing all sorts of stuff with it. So we talked about a piece of the artwork, and then we're going to have a little bit of time where we're reading about it during our literacy block. So I would attach lots of different aspects of covering the topic of 9/11, but I would attach it to the different parts of the day that we would be on. Those of you that are online, if you click on the link, the first one is the website that I got this article from. The second one is the PDF version. You're probably going to want to open up a tab with one of these. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So in case you need to have another tab or something open, you're going to want to have this article that's on the literacy closed reading screen. You're going to want that article up. Do we have anybody who's unable to get that up? Can I get a thumbs up if you have it?
I have it.
Yeah, perfect. Tyler's got it, Ella's got it. Lindsay, Jennifer.
I do. I can't find my thumbs up. Sorry.
Perfect, you're fine. At the bottom, there's a reaction thing. You can click on it. And it lets you either raise your hand or give a thumbs up. Ah, see? Learn something new every day.
Thanks.
All right. So if you have this up, if you're just reading it on your computer screen, you are probably going to have to like jot things down on a separate piece of paper. If I was in class, I would literally have the students have one in their hands. So as a secondary part to the VTS lesson, this one might be a literacy accompaniment to it, okay? So if we were to do a closed reading of the article Empty Sky, A Personal History of September 11th, 2001. So this particular article happens to be appropriate for 3rd through 8th grade. Now, on the Scholastic website that I got this from, they have all sorts of different articles that you can click on and use for other classes or things that you want to for that. The really awesome thing is, where it says 3 through 5 or 6 through 8, those are actual active links that if I click on it, it's going to change the reading level to 3rd through 5th grade. And it's going to change some of the words so that's more appropriate for them. If I click on the upper level, it's going to beef it up a little bit for older kids. Same article, just makes it a little bit more appropriate for them. That's actually a really cool feature, because you might have some high readers that might need a stronger one. You might have some readers that are struggling a little bit, and that might help you differentiate just a single article. Okay, so I'm going to have you either jot things down on a separate sheet of paper. If you have the article in front of you, I would grab a writing utensil. If you have colored writing utensils, now's your chance to shine. I'm going to have you use 3 different colors if you have them. Ooh. This will tell me like what kind of teacher you have if you have like the assortment of pen supplies. There's usually like a certain type of pen that makes you happy. That's when you know you're meant to be a teacher. If you don't have any, I do have some markers in here if you want to borrow them. That's fine. Those of you at home, if you're able to print it quick and write directly on the article, that would work great. If you're printing, I would definitely use the PDF version. If you can't, you can literally just jot some of the things down under each category. So we're gonna have 3 different categories. So just make sure you have kind of space to do that. You can make a trifold on your paper, 3 columns, options. All right, so for closed reading, to further your knowledge about 9/11, I'm gonna have you read through this article 3 times. We're skimming it kind of quickly. I'm not actually gonna have you read it the whole time. So we're gonna kind of do the shortened version of it, okay? But what you're going to do on the first time we read it through, remember the other week when we were talking about facts. Facts are important, they're things we can prove, right? So I'm going to have you pick one of your colored pens, markers that you have, and I want you to either highlight or underline, whatever way your pen works, right? I want you to identify facts in this article, okay? I'm gonna give you a few minutes to read through. Those of you online, you are making a list of facts from the article. All right? I'm gonna give you a little bit of time. Okay. I'm gonna give you just another moment longer, then we're gonna shift gears. All right, awesome job. I was going to put the online people into breakout rooms, but one of those moments where I love technology when it changes, when you don't use your normal device or computer and you're like, where did everything go? So I can't exactly locate my normal button for that. So we're just going to go kind of more popcorn. So whether you're in the room or on the computer on Zoom, we're just going to kind of share out some of the facts that you found. Feel free when you're brave and ready. What's a fact that you found?
I'm Sarah.
Yeah.
I found one in like the other tax article. I underlined where it said that like shortly after like the Twin Towers or the plane crashed into like the Pentagon, and we're heading towards like the Capitol and the White House.
Okay, so we've got another attack that happened on the Pentagon. It's not just the Twin Towers. That's a great, it's not a great fact, I shouldn't say that. Great job sharing a fact. All right, what's another fact that we found?
I put in the same part of it, I underlined how it said it killed 189 people.
Okay, so our number of people that it affected, you say 189? 189 people.
The fact is that it happened on September 11, 2001.
Okay, fact is the date, happened on September 11, 2001.
It was the deadliest attack since Pearl Harbor.
Okay, so we've got the deadliest attack on the U.S. since Pearl Harbor.
There were 10 members of Al Qaeda that crashed the 2 hijacked planes into the Twin Towers.
Okay, so we've got 10 members of Al Qaeda who were, you say on the airplanes?
Yeah, it said crashed 2 hijacked planes.
Okay,
into the Twin
so
Towers.
10 members that were on the 2 planes that crashed into the Twin Towers. All right, you guys did a great job. So with closed reading, if I was working with this with students, we'd keep going and we would dig back through the text for like a different thing. So if you were to change colors with your pen, your marker, whatever it is that you're using, the second time maybe with this, this article, I might have you look for colorful language. Now, when I say colorful language, I'm looking for things that are descriptors or they're like bigger words that like really give you more of an idea, okay? So those are the words that help create more of the story of it. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. I'm gonna give you a minute and a half, and I just want you to look for maybe 3. See if you can find 3 different colorful language uses in there. And it doesn't have to be like blue as in colorful, but just descriptive. All right, if I had a group of students that I was doing this with, I would probably have them find a different partner. We'd pair up a different way, changing up who they're talking to, getting some different voices heard. But once again, we're in this interesting situation that we're in, so we'll just kind of share out as we have been. What are some of those colorful phrases that you found? One that I noticed was that the descriptor spewing. So it says, we watched smoke spewing from the upper floors.
Another one that I found was the smell of death and burning plastic filled the air.
The smell of death, burning plastic.
I found one where it said, while smoke billowed from one orange fireball from the other.
Okay, yeah. Anybody online have one that they noticed?
Profoundly.
Profoundly?
Yeah, it said the nation profoundly. That it would change the nation profoundly.
I had that one circled too. Sporadic. That was the exact next one that I looked down at on my paper. So talking about cell service and how it became sporadic, not being able to reach your family members. Nice. Okay, so if I was doing closed reading with students, I would have them look back through the article a third time. So really, the purpose of this is just trying to get students to really get up close and personal with what they're reading, and you're not just glancing over it. So like you're digging back in for more information. So on this last one, I'm going to have you change your color that you're using or make a new column depending on how you're doing this. On this last one, you're actually looking for some phrases. And in these phrases, I want you to think more about the emotional aspect of this article, okay? So with these phrases, I want you to think about ones that when you read that phrase, it kind of made you pause. Maybe it made you catch your breath. Maybe you thought like, oh, like that was like one of those moments that just kind of catch you off guard, or like you were really kind of touched about the situation that they were in. So phrases that gave you some pause in this article when you read that statement. Welcome back, Miss Ella. We are reading through the article a third time, and this time they are looking for phrases that might like give you a little bit of pause when you read them in the article. They're kind of more like emotional moments within the article where it kind of makes you almost catch your breath, okay?
Okay, yeah. I'm sorry. My laptop died. I wasn't paying attention.
You're fine, no worries. All right, I could probably give you lots of time in order to do this, but in the sake of just keeping our class moving on, rolling on, and you probably know lots about 9/11 already, so you don't necessarily need to be studying it right now. What are some of the moments that gave you pause within this article? What are things that you noticed?
The very first one that I noticed, in the very first paragraph, how it says the seats at the dinner table have been empty.
Their seats at the dinner table have been empty ever since. I could see that striking a chord with students.
Sometimes I just flashed into my workplace and like thinking about how they thought it was like an accident and wouldn't expect somebody to put on it. Shocked at it.
So like, I remember when it actually happened in the first one, we were like, whoa, like that happened. And then when the second one hit, like that was like that dawning moment where you're like, oh, like this is big. When they talk about a plane hitting the building. Yeah. What other moments gave you pause?
When like they were watching it on TV and like the mom's like, your father is in there, and she like burst in his tears.
I had that one in
That
my life
kind of like
too,
gave me chills.
right?
Yeah.
That moment where you have to actually like say the words like your father is in there.
I found the one at the end that said more than 400 firefighters and other rescue workers. So like not only all the people that lost their lives in the plane and in the building, but also people trying to save all those other people.
Right? Yeah, those are definitely big things. So with closed reading, and I know this class isn't about like teaching you reading strategies, but we talked about the artwork, we talked about the sculpture, right? And then tying it into other curriculum that you would actually be normally having in your classroom. So not doing something just for the sake of like having artwork and talking about it. Like I would love for you guys to do that. Like that would be my selfish art teacher side of me. That would be like, yeah, let's do that. But taking actual things that you need to teach students, using art maybe as a hook to get them in, and then taking the things that you need to cover. So with that article, I was like, oh, we're gonna look for facts because that's what we're already doing in class, right? Colorful language, maybe they're working on descriptors and things like that in their writing. Maybe that's something that they're working on. Because this particular article happens to be more of an emotional type one of those big events that like we should probably know about. That's why I added the third one where it's like those phrases within the article that like give you that pause. So it's kind of giving students time to like stop and sit down and think about the emotional aspect of it, even though it's just an article. That way they're not just skimming past it, like there's actual feelings involved with it. Okay? So, an article reading, the closed reading, like this could be the VTS extension, where it's just the next thing that ties in with it. Okay? Like it doesn't have to be just a simple little worksheet. Like it can just be regular lessons that you would do in class, but it ties it together. Does that make sense? So with this one, because it's more literacy based, I would grab like a literacy standard that we're working on. So maybe it's something about finding facts and writing. So that might be the second standard that's in your lesson plan. I would say that's probably one of the two things that I usually end up noting on people's lesson plans is, do you have an art standard? And then do you have a different context? Like what are you tying the art to? Because as a classroom teacher, like you're not going to just teach art. If you're doing this in your classroom, it's probably the other standard that's going to be most important to you. The art is just going to be like that bonus thing that helps students get engaged. All right? So that's a little bit more of another example. We'll share out some of what you all were doing with yours as well. I'm going to share my screen again. My online friends, you are going to have to tell me if for some reason, if the audio is not picking up on this next video for you, okay? Okay, sounds good. Sometimes it does, I'm talking to myself. I really am that crazy, I'm sorry. Like our teacher has other classes just, she's insane. All right, so art is a way that we can hook students in and get them more engaged in what they're learning. It might not be a VTS strategy that you use. Maybe it's more of just something else that's engaging. So another example of using the arts to tell stories, if we were to use videos or homemade clips, this particular video is an illustrated version of an interview where somebody is sharing their story. So it's called StoryCorps, and they went and documented as many of the people from 9/11 as they could, whether they were first responders, whether they made it out of the building, but they just interviewed as many people as they could to document their stories and what they went through. If you are a tender-hearted person, you might have a tear from this. I'm just kind of forewarning you. But this is another story that could engage students at an appropriate level about 9/11. Okay? So we're going to take a look at this.
There were a couple of days each year you were allowed to take your children to work. And Joe loved it. That was his birthday present, that he would spend the night at Firehouse. We'd have a cake, and the guys I worked with, they would take a milk container and they'd cut out a facsimile of a building, and they'd put it on the top of the cake, and then they would light it up. And they would tell Joe to put it out, and he would throw a pot of water on it. The birthday cake was a little soggy, but this is what he wanted. Joe started dating a young lady whose father was a police officer. And he came home one day and he says, I'm taking a police test. And I says, Joe, you're only 17 years old. He said, no big deal. On the other side of the room, my son, John, wanted to be the next Donald Trump. He was going to make $1 million to take care of his mother and father. But in 1984, I came down with throat cancer. He noticed then how my unit took care of us. And he says, I'm going to become a fireman. I said, you're kidding me. Firemen don't make millions of dollars. How am I going to live like a king? But I was very happy, very proud. My father had been on the fire department, and he was the first one to be issued badge number 3436. And they reissued it to my son John. So the badge was only used by two. Both the boys would call me when they were working. John would always call around 3:30, 4 o'clock. And that particular night, September 10th, we spoke for a few minutes. And I says, I love you. And he says, I love you. Joe called me in the morning and told me to turn on the television, and a plane just hit the trade center. He says, I'm heading south on West Street. This is a big one. And I just said, be careful. I love you. I love you too. That was it. We had the boys for John for 36 years, Joe for 34 years. Badge number 3436. I don't have any coulda, shoulda, or wouldas. I wouldn't have changed anything. It's not many people that the last words they said to their son or daughter was, I love you. And the last words they heard was, I love you. So that makes me sleep at night.
All right. So, Storycorps is another place that you can go to get information about different events, things like this. But it's just another aspect of using art, even though it's just like a cartoon version. But it's one way that you could get students engaged in a more challenging topic. Okay? And it doesn't have to be BTS. So this one really had nothing to do with BTS, just showing you a different aspect. Okay? So I easily could have done this story prior to doing the closed reading. Just another way to get them kind of piqued, interested, wanting to learn more about it so they can start digging in and learning some of it. All right. I don't want to do that. I want all my slides back. All right, so thinking of the stories that we listen to, those create human connections. And that's really what people all throughout time, all different cultures, that's what we've done with art, is we tell stories through it. So just using that natural thing that we're inclined to do, create things, so like tell stories. So you think about different different hunters doing cave drawings in France. And we have like the Lascaux caves where they're drawing their little hunts that they went on, the type of animals that they found, different weapons that they used, and they're documenting it on the walls of the cave. Like they're telling a story. But that's also how we learn about them. Okay? So just finding a way that we can use that to our advantage as educators. All right, just for kind of reference, sometimes with students, they kind of need that before, during, after kind of look. So when they see photos of New York City, they're probably seeing more of what it looks like currently. Thinking about the immediate moments afterwards where everything's kind of hazy in the smoke, and I'm not purposely showing like the smoke actively happening, but like after it's kind of settled for the next day or so, that's what it looked like. But what did it look like beforehand? Like, those two towers were huge. just so that they can get a little bit of reference in their head for like how big this event really was. All right. Article review. Let's see here. I was going to put you in breakout rooms. It's like breaking my heart here. Let's see if I can find. No, that's not what I want. Now I'm just randomly pushing things. I shouldn't do that. We're gonna go kind of separate. We'll go people in the room, people not in the room. How do I? All right. Let's see here. There's really nothing that I would have my breakout room option. Just making me kind of sad. I want a meeting room, I want my breakout room. If I press security, does bad things happen? I can keep people out. Don't want to do that. Advanced sharing options. No. All right, so here's the deal. I want you to think about your article that you read for this week, the one that you've already read. With that, I'm going to have my people online. I'm going to have you talk amongst the four of you, hopefully. We'll see how this works with the speaker in the room. And then those of you that are in here, if I can just have the three of you turn towards each other, I'm just have you two kind of turn towards each other. That way you're not going to shuffle too far. But what I am looking for is I want you to share with your group 2 things that you learned about in your article or you found interesting from your article. And while you're listening to what other people are sharing, I want you to think about one of the things that like you're getting from them. You're like, oh, like that's enough. Like, what are you picking up from what they're saying? So you're giving 2, and you're going to at least get 1. I am a very forgetful person, so if I notice something right away that's like piquing my interest, I'm probably going to jot it down because I'll forget. I'll remember like half of it, and I'm like, oh shoot, I'm starting down. So I'm going to jot it down, thing that I'm finding interesting from somebody else, but I know I'm going to share at least 2 with my group, okay? All right, so those of you in the class, feel free to turn towards each other. Those of you online, you can unmute your microphones. And I'm going to see if I can turn you down a little bit where you can still hear each other, but maybe you're not super loud in the room, okay? All right, you're giving 2.
Can you guys hear me on here?
Yeah.
Okay. 2 examples from mine. I don't know if you can hear me with everyone else talking. One, it talked about how a student, he was labeled like the bad kid, and he was getting suspended and expelled from school. And then they had like a theater teacher come into their class, and they started making like skits and things, so it like intrigued him and he got excited about it. And so even though he was suspended for 10 days, he still snuck into school just to attend his English class so that he could participate in that. So they were able to get his attention and get him excited about something. And then the other thing that it kind of, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. And then the other thing that they discussed in the article that I had is where a company, it was like an actor director that came in to to a high school and they decided to turn like some open space into like a farmer's market, and have students come in and help run the farmer's market on Sundays. And then they gave that money to the school in exchange for allowing them to have like theatrical program. Kind of an example of thinking outside the box to still provide a type of art to the student.
Yep. Okay, so the two things I had were you can use art to like assess student learning. So like you could use like art drawings or something to label how a student sees a way of something, like you might read something one way and some student might think of it as another way, but you could see what they are learning or what they're comprehending. And then you can also use art to like fill gaps. So like teachers might not understand like what students are trying to get or what they're trying to say. So they might draw a picture and then they might try to like use art to fill information and become more familiar with information. That's what I took away out of my article.
Who wants to go next?
I can go. Sorry, I was writing. Okay, so mine was about, okay, sorry, 1 second. Okay, so mine was about making art classes for students who are blind or have low vision. And so I did it because I want to teach special education, so I thought it would be interesting to see. And it's basically this guy from the University of Nebraska. His wife has vision problems. And so he came up with these Please Touch the Art workshops for people from the age of 12 to 78 years old, or that's just like the age range of participants he had that have actually participated in it. And so it was for people who had like no art experience to all the way to the college level. Like it was for basically anybody. And they'd start with like 3 hours of general instruction and they'd build the technique skills, and then they would get to like make their own. And a lot of the students like really benefited from it because number one, it wasn't something that they had really got to do before. And then a lot of it was lots of physical touch and stuff. And they did things with like depth perception. Like he basically let them feel depth perception, which is really like, it's hard to explain, but it was really cool like to see how they did it. So basically what he just did was he brought art to people who you would never think of being able to experience it fully.
Binti, do you have anything to add?
For my article, it was on a program called Art Feeds. This program helps kids express their emotion through art making. And then one of the things that I found interesting in the article was there was in the program they worked with this kid that had a behavioral disorder, and then after they like working with them, he gained confidence and self-worth. And at first this program started small and then they expanded. So at first they only were working with kids that have behavioral disorder or any other type of special needs. After they expanded, they started to work with all kids because they realized that the program is helpful to all kids. Basically the program works with all kids trying to build it encourages them to do problem solving, self reflection, and storytelling through activities, and it also encouraged them to take risk. Instead of in the program, they encourage them not to say I can't do it. They encourage them to at least try to see if they can do it. That's why I really like the program.
All right, I heard some great conversations going on. Sorry for the crazy trip that I just took the camera on there for a second, a little bit ago. Maybe you guys noticed, maybe you didn't. That's okay too. I just knocked it off of the table. I heard some great conversations though, things that you were gaining from other people. Some that jumped out at me, the article with the artwork that the blind students could touch. So like literally bringing artwork to them in a way that they can actually experience it. Like sometimes things like that will just kind of jump out at you in ways that you didn't think of before. We're gonna keep rolling. Sometimes we'll share out like whole group, but I feel like that one, like you're dating from other people. We'll kind of let it be at that. With the VTS lesson plans that you wrote, if you wrote and were able to do your VTS lesson, do you feel comfortable enough, like think like elevator version, like short conversation, but do you feel comfortable enough sharing your idea of what you came up with for VTS lesson? Like you just give like a tiny brief little version. You want to share yours?
Sure.
Sure. Okay.
Why not?
Why? I love
Okay,
that.
so, let me like a brief.
Just real brief.
So, my lesson, I chose the art standard as like selected and described like works of art that illustrate like daily life experience, with like oneself and others. And then to tie in, I did, kind of like a science type social studies, kind of both, develop a simple sketch, drawing, or physical model to illustrate how the shape of an object helps its function. And I did first grade, and so we did a lot of, I picked an art with like transportation.
Okay.
And my VTS, like the extension is what I did. So pretty much just to sum it up, I picked an art of like a car, and I really wanted like the students to focus on like how important like specific things on a car is. So like wheels, like you can't get anywhere without wheels. And like we also incorporated like bikes or fire trucks and a bunch of different stuff. And I had like the kids kind of like, you know, go through like pieces of art to like point out what's important, like and why you need it. And my extension is I would have them create their very own transportation. It could be whatever they wanted, and they would pull out like why they chose it, but also like the like importance of it. Like so like this really cool art picture I found that had like a gas station in the background. So like obviously you need gas in order to drive a car. So that was like an example I would show the kids, so they could like if they wanted to do a bicycle, they could draw a bike with like 2 wheels or whatever, and like have a basket in it, and like explain like why having these tools on this bike is important.
Okay. So we've got the artwork image of a car. It was a painting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we've got a painting of a car. They're talking about the car. They're breaking down things that they see on it and the discussion. And then later on, they're talking more about transportation and the necessary things that they need in order for that transportation to work, to succeed. Okay. Tyler, are you brave enough?
Yeah, I can share mine.
Okay.
So mine had to do with 3rd grade science, and so I chose a picture of a butterfly that was blended into a tree. And then so they would have to show what, or tell me what they saw in that picture before I would tell them what it was. So then they would be influencing, like learning how predators hide from, or how animals hide from their predators, sorry. So then my lesson was they were going to create their own butterfly of any color and then debate it with the class of which color would best hide from their say predator. And then my extension would be how would other animals that can't blend into things hide from their predators?
So do you see how that's kind of working, where they're looking at an image, a photo of a butterfly, thinking about like how it blends into its surroundings, and then how does that natural camouflage that animals have the ability to have, like how does that help them in the real world? How does it help them with their predators? Now, sometimes that helps the predator too, where they're also blending in so that their prey doesn't notice them. Kind of goes a little bit both ways. You might have a few students that will notice that key aspect, that connection. And do I have one more person that's brave enough to share their BTS idea? Yeah.
I did second grade, and I did the painting like a Sunday afternoon. It's like the one where all those people are looking like into the lake, kind of.
Yep.
And I'm having them make predictions about what the people in the photo are looking at. And then they kind of just go through that and take time and then share out. And then my extension is having the students draw their own point of view, like either behind the people or from the lake looking out to what they would be looking at, or what the people would be looking at.
Okay, so artwork wise, we've got Georges Seurat's A Sunday on Le Grand Japet, I think.
Yeah.
And the artwork is, if you're thinking back to like things that you did when you were younger, and like, I'm sure this is an artwork that you maybe touched on. It's usually an art teacher's favorite to like embed in one of the grade levels, but it's the one that they do with the tiny little dots when they create the image. And then from a distance, those dots become the image of the people. It's also the one that in the video I showed you, the kid was really excited about the symbiosis of, do you remember that? Like he was really excited about how everything works together to create the whole. So that's that particular artwork image. This is taking it a different direction. So you're also like thinking about perspectives. And so we're taking, like, think of the higher order scale of taking that flat picture frame, like plane where you're seeing them all look to the side. And you're asking students to physically take like the camera lens of that and turn it so that they're now in with those people and what they're looking at. Like that's actually really high order thinking to have them do, but they're fully capable of doing it. So you're asking them to do hard things. I love it. Does that make a little bit more sense? Do I have anybody who's still questioning, like, either I'm still crazy, I don't know how to do this. Like, I'm not calling you crazy, I'm calling you crazy actually. But like I still just need more help. How do I make this lesson plan go? Or maybe you have an idea for the image or what you want to do to connect it, but you're just not sure on like the second piece that you're needing. Do you have anybody that needs more help on that? I don't see anything changing on my computer. If anybody who wants more help. And we can always talk more like after, once people are working on like the project that we're gonna make in here. So don't feel bad, like we can chat more about this in just a little bit. If I were to find my way back. All right, so on this slideshow, if I go back to it and I click on integrating arts, there is actually a link on that. I'm muted. Am I still muted? No, okay.
No, we can hear you.
It's just way old. Okay. Sorry, I was just now reading the chat bar and I was like, oh no, we've just gone through how much of this lesson and I was talking at them. And okay. It's fine. We're all fine. We're good. Okay. If I am on this, I can click on the screen and it's going to take me to the benefits. Now the question is, those of you online, did it switch to the Jamboard for you? Or no?
Like we can see your screen on the Jamboard.
Is that what you can see? Yes? No? Yes? Question mark.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we are going to create a Jamboard. It's not, like, don't think of it as being anything hard. We're going to really quickly create it. Oh, no. Okay, so here's the deal. I am going to have you on the Jamboard. You're going to have a sticky note that you're going to add. To add a sticky note, if you've never done Jamboard, over on this side, there's the stack of sticky notes or the squares with the writing on it. You're going to click on one. It's going to add it over here. We've got benefits. If you can think of a benefit of integrating arts, you're going to type that in, and then you are going to add that to the benefit side. If you can think of a drawback, like, oh, what would be a negative thing of me adding this art aspect into my classroom? Like, what would be one of the drawbacks that we would have? I'm going to have you add one of each to the group board. My online people, do I need to stop sharing so you can do your thing?
No, we should still be able to do it.
Okay, just checking. All right, things that I'm seeing pop up for benefits. It allows people to express themselves in a way that may not have been or may not have tried before. Spark student interest in the lesson. Let's see here. Able to assess student learning, give you feedback on things that student might not be learning. With COVID, it helps that the arts aren't forgotten and are still added as a part of the school day. Students can use art to express themselves and escape from the real world. Integrating art into a lesson plan keeps students engaged and interested. It can lower stress levels in students. It can pull a student in that might not be excited about learning in general or a regular subject, core subject. All right, some of the drawbacks that are popping up. Students could become confused and frustrated. The extension gets left behind and not properly done. It could take more work from the teachers of thinking about creative and engaging lesson plans. One example is with the BTS. Not all students will create the spark or connection with art. Some kids are less creative and could create issues with confidence in assignments. Some students just don't like doing arts and crafts. If the purpose of the integration is not done properly, it could become a distraction. Maybe one of the drawbacks might be you might be really passionate about it. You might be really great at embedding it and engaging the students with it. But if you don't have the support and the backing of like your administration, when you're doing something that maybe not the rest of the third grade team is doing, or they're more focused on like the math scores and they want to bring those up and they think like this might not help with that. So if you don't have the support of your superiors. Another thing that might be a drawback is sometimes with art, it's money. Some things can be done very, very, very affordably. That's one of the nice things about the VTS portion is usually like just finding an image and having them talk about it doesn't necessarily cost you anything. The activity we're going to do today, like having powder tempera, getting the eggs, using the different supplies to like create the paint in containers and things like that. Like that does add up when you're thinking about like I'm doing different lessons every week and like you're doing different things. Like in what ways can you save money in doing that? But those are just some, there's benefits, there's drawbacks, lots of different things. All right. With, sometimes I'll talk about the different standards that art has. And when I was first asking you about if you remember the standards, and we had like the aqua ones at the top of that PDF document. So those are the creating standards. They all kind of fit into that circle within like their Venn diagram, right? When we talk about the art standards that were in purple, those are the presenting ones. That's how they are refining things or putting things on display or selecting things that go together. So maybe you're picking out you're having students pick out the artwork that deals with transportation and they're eliminating the ones that don't. Planning, up here I have it in like a green color. It actually, in the standards on the PDF document, when they're planning out projects, they're actually listed in the aqua category because some of them go back and forth. But with this crazy little set of rings that I've got going on here, you're going to notice that there's like little pathways between them. When you're creating art and like they're actually making like an art project, the planning that goes into it, the connecting it to other subjects in that planning, and then the thought process between them experimenting with materials. We're going to do that aspect today. So experimenting with the materials, that goes into the creating portion. When you're actually using the paint that you create today and you're carefully trying to paint something in, that's more of the presentation of it. You're working on like the craftsmanship of it, but you're going to be going back and forth between those. So I'll make my paint today and I'm ready to go and I'm ready to paint, but then all of a sudden, oh, when I'm painting in this diagram, I need a different color. Well, now I need to go back to the planning stage and I need to take the colors that I have and make a new one. So there's a whole new thought process going back into it. So that's more planning. And then I'm painting it again and I'm painting a new area. So I'm going back to the creating. And then you're thinking as a student, I'm trying to clean up areas. I'm trying to make sure my brush goes all the way up to the edge of my shapes. So that might be going back into the presenting portion of like the whole project. So as a student, as an artist, as the person who's creating it, when we talk about art standards, they all start to intertwine with each other. So if you have students plan out a project that they're going to make, and they create it, and they like display it for other people to see, they're probably doing 3 to 5 different art standards. I don't want you to have to pick all of those standards. Just focus on like 1 or 2. When it comes to the point of our final project that you share out with everybody, then I'm gonna have you kind of beef it up like, oh, they were planning out what they were doing. They're making something to show their different cloud forms tying into the science lesson. And the student is then sharing their cloud form sculpture with the class. So in our final lesson, I'm going to have you create a lesson that has all of the different parts. But in your weekly ones, you only have to pick one. But then you pick another subject to tie in with it. So when we do this week's, you're gonna have one art standard that you select, and you're going to pick one science standard, okay? With this, around the outside, I've got that red connecting yellow, or yellow connecting red responding. There's also one about persisting underneath, because working through your problems, working through the struggle, oh, my paint's not turning out right, still moving on to succeed. That kind of encompasses everything. You're always making connections to what it is that you're learning. So those other standards, they kind of like hold everything together. Sometimes we're thinking about the project afterwards. So I have students write like artist statements or like a one sentence to tell me about your artwork. That's the connecting, responding type standards if you're having students do that. But then they're thinking back on all those stages. So all of this, it becomes just like one giant knot of like their project. There's not like a nice flow to art standards like there is with like math. Like I learn this and then I learn this, and the next day we do the next step, and we have first with ones, and then we do tens, and then we do hundreds. Like there's not an easy flow like that. You could be going back and forth, and it's not just planning, make it done. Okay, so just keep in mind, with art, you go in and out of the different sections. All right. In here, I have it listed as group lesson plans. Normally, in the classroom, we've got about 15 people. And for this creation portion today, usually I pair people up with somebody next to them, and you make together one amount of paint, and then you share that amount of paint, make your own creation, and then we make the lesson plan. Respecting other people's space, things like that. You're probably going to be making your own paint today. I mean, you could hand sanitize and stuff like that, and we could share some supplies, but you're still gonna wanna keep some distance. I still have it listed as a group lesson plan. If you know somebody else that's in the class and you want to team up and work on the lesson plan together, I'm still okay with that because I've had that done before in the past. Or if you're just like, nope, just write it up myself, like it's fine, like I don't have to worry about intermixing with anybody or trying to get together with them later or scheduling like a FaceTime call or something with them. Like if it's just easier to do it on your own, that's perfectly fine too. Okay, I'm gonna leave that one open for you to choose whether you just do it on your own or whether you're partnering up with somebody. If you partner up, you both still have to turn in yours and let me know who your partner was. That'll actually save me a lot of time in grading because then I only have to grade one and then I can just move the stuff over. Chances are it's the exact same. But just know that that's an option, okay? We are going to do a group task. I say group, I know that we're doing this next to each other. It's not really group right now. My online people, I'm gonna have to shift the camera and try and show you what it is that I'm doing because I do want you to see what we're doing in class for this activity. But then we're going to have to adapt it for you and where you're at and what supplies you have available to you. Okay? So at some point, you're going to want to have a sheet of paper next to you that has a list of things I can make paint from. Because we're going to do a little bit of problem solving with you, but that's okay. It's still possible. Because if you have a kitchen available to you, you probably have access to things that create stain, if nothing else. All right? Okay. So we are going to make egg tempura. Do you have anybody in here who is allergic to eggs? No, okay. I do have one student at school who's really allergic to them. So with tempera paint, even if I buy like the bottle of tempera paint, it's still going to have 3 ingredients. It's going to have pigment. That's the thing that has color. So out in nature, I can get blue from crushed up beetle shells in Afghanistan. I can get yellow from tree sap. I can get a bluish violet color from smashing blueberries. I can use strawberries to create a stain. Like, you're going to be able to find things around you, online people, that can help with the pigment step of it, right? Now, egg tempera is going to have pigment. I've got some of that in here. It's powder. Be careful. But the good news is you have a mask on, so it's not like you're breathing in the powder. The second thing has egg yolk. That's what I'm going to show you how to do. So we're going to deal with the animal cell structure of the yolk. And we're going to be kind of dissecting it a little bit. It's kind of crazy and weird when you see it the way that we're going to do it. Eggs happen to be a binder. So it's something that like holds things together. So when I make chocolate chip cookies, I add an egg to it to hold the ingredients together. So it's kind of like the glue, the edible glue of my cookies. Well, in paint, it's going to act like the glue that's going to hold the pigment to your paper. Okay? When I have tempera paint at school, it's going to usually have a different, more modern version of the binder. Sometimes it's more of like an artificial glue base. Oftentimes, it's something that we call gum arabic. So that's more like a tree sap type glue. And so it's just something we find in nature, and they use it to help bind things together. So we've got pigment, we've got a binder. So for us, that's the egg yolk. And then we have water for tempera paint. So water is just going to make it fluid so that it's paintable, spreadable. Okay? So when you add water, we want to add little bits at a time to give it a consistency that makes it spreadable. Now, if I was making oil paint, I would be adding water to it. I would be adding oil to it. Okay? I would still have the pigment and a binder and oil if it was oil paint. So we can literally make this out of most anything. One of the reasons why I like showing you with the powder tempera is powder tempera is super cheap and affordable. So when art costs money, powder tempera is super cheap and affordable. I can take it and I can actually mix it together with just the pigment and the water. And it's going to make more of a stain. It's not going to be super permanent on the surfaces, but if I was dealing with more just really young children, I would probably be okay with that. If I wanted it to be a piece of artwork that's going to last a little longer for them, maybe then I would actually go through and add in the binder to make that happen. With this, if I didn't want to deal with eggs, I literally could squeeze some Elmer's glue in it and it would act like the binder. So just know that that's a possibility. Those of you online, when we go and we talk about creating paint, you're going to have to dig around and think about what can I use as the pigment. And then you're also going to have the fluid, so the water's going to help it move. If I have just pigment and water, that's the stain. Option 2 on finishing off the project that we're going to create with the egg cell diagram. I did give you guys permission to go ahead and just make a stain. Or if you want to try using the egg yolk and finding enough pigment that you could actually try making at least one color that has the binder, that's okay too. Spices in your kitchen are great pigment. Curry makes a really good yellow. Paprika makes a pretty good brick red. Lots of different things you might be able to find, okay? But I'm going to stop sharing this screen with you, and I'm going to shift the camera so that you can see it. All right. Okay, let's see here. How am I going to do this? I kind of want my screen bigger. Am I able to pin these screens? If I go up to the extra, I can pin myself. That way you can see what I'm doing a little bit bigger. Okay, there's going to be a list of supplies for you guys that are on these little clipboards. I'm probably going to put one of my bucket trash cans between you two and one between you, and you get your own back there. But I'm gonna have you make your own paint. Okay, so what's going to happen is I've got a stack of 4 cups. So those of you at home, you're gonna need something to mix in. I'm going to get, of these cups, I'm gonna get about like a half a cup of water just to take back to my spot. It's not gonna use that much. There are 4 cups. Take all 4 with you because you're gonna make blue, yellow, and red paint. So in theory, primary colors, but it's more of a magenta and a cyan. So I'm gonna take a little bit of water. I have various different medicine droppers, eyedroppers, so I can add small amounts of water at a time. Those come in pretty handy when you're dealing with kids. So I'm gonna take the water back to my seat, and I'm gonna take one of the colors, and I'm going to add my pigment. And I'm going to use the spatula to try and do that. These are one of the moments where I think they're crazy for giving us a room with carpet. But then I'm like, they gave us the room. Good thing it's dark carpet. Okay, I have a decent amount of pigment powder in here. If you're making this at home, you're not going to have to use quite as much powder pigment. It's just, I'm making a fairly consistent amount. I'm actually gonna do just a little bit back. Okay. Okay, I've got my color. I'm going to have a stir stick that I'm going to use. If I was making this, I would get the other colors too. But I'm just going to show you one. So I need a paper towel for each color I'm making. So I have one color, I'm getting one paper towel for that color, plus one paper towel for my fingers when I start spilling. Okay, so if I'm making 3 colors, I would have 4 paper towels. All right, I've got my bucket for trash, if you're dealing with the eggs. I've got a paint palette for mixing colors in when I'm all done. The paint palette actually works quite nicely to keep the eggs from rolling around on your table. I didn't think of that myself. I actually had a student think of that, but I'll take credit for the moment. I've got some paper and some paintbrushes down here. When I'm just mixing the colors together, I like to use the butt of the paintbrush. That's the back side without the bristles. And that way I can stir and I can wipe it off pretty quickly. All right. I do have the sheet that I had up on the board. I've got one of those that you can have at your table. For those of you at home, that's terrible a view of that for you, so I'm sorry I haven't tried showing you that. But the screen from Blackboard or from the slideshow that said egg tempera and it gives you the steps, you're going to want the steps with you. It's also on the small clipboard on the next side. Okay, so when I'm preparing myself for making a slight mess, I'm trying not to make as much of a mess. So the egg whites, we don't actually need in here. Because we're just in a classroom, there's no real way to try and save them and or not spread germs. So we're literally going to be throwing ours away. If I was doing this at home, I would probably save the whites and make something like a egg white omelet or something. Like I could put them to use. We're gonna test your ability of cracking eggs. and separating the yolk from the whites. So I'm probably going to fail at this for a moment, just because it's all on screen, right? No pressure. So I'm going to try and break my egg so that I have 2 halves. One of you watching probably has like great skill at this and they're like, oh, she's doing it all wrong. But I just like go back to like baking days with like my grandma and like slowly putting the egg yolk back and forth from one side to the other. I've got a little extra piece coming over here, which happens to be the, what's it called? The Chalazé. So we're trying to get rid of the extra piece. We do have the hand sanitizer wipes over there. I'm probably going to use a couple to wipe off my hands after this, but trying to get as many chunks of it off as I can. I actually am going to set that yolk in my trash bin. I'm going to take the yolk and I'm going to set it on my paper towel. I'm actually going to use this shell in just a minute. So I've got the egg yolk on the paper towel. We want to get as much of the egg white off as we can. We don't actually want that in our paint if possible. So I'm going to slowly roll the egg yolk on the paper towel to different areas, trying to encourage the egg whites to soak into the paper towel and not be a part of the egg yolk anymore. So if I was teaching this as a science lesson, we would probably be talking about how the egg cell is actually one of the largest animal cells. And so they could actually look at like the different parts of it. So we'd be talking about the Chalazé, the piece that came off just there, that was kind of connecting it. We are going to have this little membrane that's holding it all together. And that's going to be one of the pieces that we actually want to get off of there. I might be able to use my one egg yolk for most of it. Okay, you're going to notice as you get rid of most of the egg whites, it's not super, super shiny anymore. It's a little bit matte and it kind of changes. So what I want to do next is I actually want to take the egg sac off of it. So I have to puncture it and I want the egg yolk to just come out. But I want to keep the egg sac on the paper towel. All right, in order to do that, I need something sharp. I'm going to use the corner of one of the shells. And I'm going to puncture in the edge. And it didn't, but I managed to get a little more egg white on there, so that's a thing. All right, that's not working. I'm going to take a smaller piece of shell, and I'm going to use it like a dagger. Okay, that definitely worked. It's going to start oozing out of this side over here. So I'm trying to reposition it so that I'm going to, you know what? You remember when I told you to read the directions? I skipped a step. I was too excited about this part. I'm going to not move my egg yolk because there's one step I skipped and I'm going to hope that it doesn't start coming out of there. And I was telling you about all my water and all that. I need to make a paste with my pigment. This is what happens when you get too excited. So I'm going to take my pigment and my water. I'm going to stir that up. And that's a little bit of a paste. Then I want to puncture my egg yolk. Crazy me. Now I have to find that opening again. Do you think I can? This is so gross. There it is. Okay, so now it's going to come out that side. I don't really need much more of it, but I want to show you that it separates the sack off of it, which is kind of crazy, but we don't actually need that in our paint. That would be like the gross part of the cookie. So I'm just going to put that in there. Forewarned you that I'd probably end up with some messy fingers. So right now I've got my pigment and some yolk and the water, and I'm giving it a stir and a stir and a stir. You do have to be a little bit aware that the yolk is kind of a yellow base, and so it is going to change the blue a little bit with the yellow of the yolk. So planning ahead a little bit, it's going to make it a bit more of an aqua color. All right, so here's the deal. This is one of the reasons why we share the paint usually between people. When I made this, it made quite a bit of paint. Like, that's probably enough that I could share with somebody. If you feel comfortable enough that you want to just share, like you each make one and then one of you is brave enough and you make the third one, you could share them. That's up to you. I mean, if you wash your hands or you sanitize your hands first, you're probably okay. But I'll leave that bit up to you. And then the blue is ready to use as paint. Is it slightly like animal cell morbid if we're using animal cells to paint an animal cell? Maybe a little. But it's kind of interesting to see the different parts of the cell. When you go to create your own diagram of it, you can either mimic the one that I have on my sheet. You can look online for an animal cell for the different parts. With a diagram, you should label the different parts of the cell. So like as you're creating it or afterwards, make sure you've got that. But yeah, we're gonna create some egg tempera, and we're gonna create an animal cell diagram as your creation. This week, we have a lesson plan to write up that has an art and science connection. If you want, you can write up a lesson plan that deals with animal cells and creating this, and then you have an example that's ready to go. That's perfectly fine. If you're like, no, I want to do color mixing, this example almost could work with that too, because we're color mixing. If you want to do prisms and light and color, like you could do something like that. Like there's lots of different versions that you could do. Similar to Tyler's VTS, he was using those natural camouflages found in nature. So like that would be a science aspect of it. There's lots of different ways you could do it. The lesson plans that I have you write, I just want you to have a wide variety kind of in your bucket of tools that you can use, okay? So if it's something you're passionate about or that you need to do for like a practicum class or something like that you're teaching like actual kids in one of the schools, like that's fine. You could make it practical and double use it that way. All right, so we're going to be creating the tempera paint, your project papers on the end, paintbrushes, eggs, the buckets. We've got the two short ones. I'm going to collect things in this one, but I also have my third bucket that I've started using. Don't mind, keep using. If I was mixing and making my paint, I would probably pour a little bit into the paint palette so that it's a little bit easier. If it's straight blue that I'm using, I could dip out of the container if I'm the only one using that. Those are options. Any questions on this? All right, this week, you've got your animal cell you've got your science lesson, and we've got your article review. So those are your main tasks for the rest of the time. I'm gonna let you guys get started with supplies here, and I'm going to take some input from, or questions from people online, okay? Yes,
I have to go to soccer after this, so is it fine if I just make this at home?
yeah, that's fine.
And just take like a paper to make it?
Mhm. Or like you could make your paints and can you carry them? No. I mean, that's up to you.
Yeah.
Totally up to you.
And
Your
you
choice.
put one egg in all three, or just like split it?
I honestly, I could probably do one egg in all three as long as I'm careful with, like, they're all ready to go when I open it.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. All right, my online friends. What kind of questions do you have for me about how you're going to make your paint?
I don't have a question about how to make the paint, I guess, but like, what is our painting supposed to look like?
So you're making an animal cell. So you're literally just making a diagram of a cell.
Just like one, like.
Yeah, so, I had something else I was going to show you, a technology app. But, there's an app called Quiver. And so like, you're literally just making like a diagram. And with that app, I need to check on my, app on my phone and see if I can show it to you, but, see if it's updated, I should say. But with that, it makes it like augmented reality, I should say. It brings it to life. So stop sharing the screen. So basically, you're making a diagram. This one's a plant cell, but
So we're making.
no, this one's marker.
Oh. But like we're doing ours with.
You're making yours with paint.
Sorry.
You could draw it in pencil first,
It just looks so good.
but you guys are literally just making a diagram.
I'm just like these red, or like I'm getting.
So we're making that, or we're basically coloring it in?
Yeah, so you're drawing it and then
Okay.
and then you're painting it in or staining it in, depending on what
Okay.
version of what it is that you can make. Like you can make like a coffee stain or a tea stain. If you have a friend that likes Kool-Aid, those are pretty artificial colors, but you could still do it.
And so then are we just making it, or are we making, like it said, like I saw on the slide, it was like planning and creating. What is the planning aspect of that you want us to do?
The planning is like when you're actually making the colors, like you're doing the planning.
So are we writing it down?
You don't have to write that down. Like if you were
Okay.
able to actually make the paint, your planning works.
Okay, okay.
So like don't stress out about that aspect. I'm looking to see if I can find an example. No. I have an online one. I don't have one of the student
Do
ones.
you want to share a bucket with me?
Actually, I bet I can pull one from last
Okay,
last
do you want to
semester.
share a bucket with me? I can go back by you.
If it was fall of 2020,
Yeah.
I don't think so either. And okay to make mistakes.
Okay, good.
If you do, like less egg yolk, yes, it's fine.
And so then I have one more question, sorry.
Okay.
For the lesson plan that we're making with the art and science aspect, so it needs to be something that encompasses an animal cell, right?
If you do it with incorporating the creation that we're making right now, then you would want to include animal, like something like where they're studying animal cells versus plant cells or
Okay,
animal cells. But you don't have to. Like,
okay,
you could forget about cells altogether and be like, no, I really want to focus on like things that my first graders would be learning. Maybe that's not their grade.
okay, thank you.
You see the example of one that was turned in last year? Yep, okay.
Yeah. So we just,
I'm gonna show you guys in here. I'll turn my screen back on now that I'm not on their grids. It'll take a nice long time. All right, do we have any other questions online?
for the lesson plan that was due
Hold on,
today,
Jenny. All right, Jenny, what do you?
for the lesson plan that we already turned in, but now that you've clarified a little bit for me, when do I need to have that corrected and turned in?
Okay, you can always resubmit, that's fine.
I don't know. Oh, like to put it in?
And it's okay if it's a little runnier. That's not a problem.
Hers is thick.
Yours needs more water.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So mine has two. Wait, what's yours? Okay. Like, literal face, water.
Okay, example from last semester, they're literally just, they made an animal cell diagram.
And that's what we're.
And they made their own colors.
So like the one that was on the slideshow, we can just choose that and then put different colors.
Yeah.
Oh, we can have this for us too, but yeah.
So those of us online, can we leave and go and do this?
Yep, so if you don't have any more questions, we've gotten to the point where we talked about the assignments that you have for next week. I am going to be uploading the video from this current class because I have two people that need to see this one. So just so that the four of you that were online know that this video, some of the conversations that you had, it's going to be on my personal YouTube channel.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
do it like, I think public, like sharing it out, but if you have the link, you can view the video. So everybody in this class will have the, just so that you know. All right, you're free to go if you are online and you are making your own paint.
Thank you.